Have you ever looked in the mirror and truly asked yourself, am I really free? Or just functioning well enough to fake it? We chase healing like a finish line, as if there's a day when all the pain packs its bags and leaves. But healing doesn't knock on your door and announce its arrival. It hides, in silence, in habits, in triggers you still can't explain. You thought you were healed because you stopped crying, because you got a job, because you got married, because you don't think about your childhood that much anymore. But let me ask you this, why do you still flinch when someone raises their voice? Why does criticism from your partner feel like a collapse? Why do you bend yourself backwards just to keep the peace? Be honest, you're not okay. You've just gotten good at pretending. The truth is harsh, so let's not dress it up. You never healed. You adapted. You never understood. You suppressed. There's a voice inside you, sharp, disappointed, cold. It whispers when you fail. It screams when you rest. It hates when you show weakness. That voice, it's not yours. It was planted long ago. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This isn't fate. This is programming. And for many of us, it began with her, your mother. I know, you don't want to go there. She did her best. She had it harder than me. She loved me. Yes. And love doesn't cancel pain. Intentions don't erase wounds. What if I told you that the love you received was conditional? What if your achievements were the price of affection? What if your silence was rewarded? What if the person who was supposed to nurture you taught you to neglect yourself? You think you're free, but you're still chasing her approval. In your boss, in your partner, in strangers on the internet. You work late not just for money, but for validation. You overgive in relationships because you're terrified of being abandoned. You stay quiet in conflict because your nervous system still associates disagreement with danger. This is not adulthood. This is adaptation. And adaptation is not healing. Healing is brutal. It starts with one sickening realization. I was not emotionally safe with the one who gave me life. Let that sink in. Not because she's evil. Not because she hated you. But because she didn't know better. Because she was broken too. But here's the catch. Understanding that doesn't erase what it did to you. So stop skipping over your own pain in the name of empathy. Stop defending the person who couldn't defend you. You're not being ungrateful. You're being honest. Your mother can be both a survivor and a source of your trauma. Two truths can exist at once. Let me tell you about a man I once met. Successful, intelligent, kind. But every time he spoke to his mother, he shrank. His voice got softer. He apologized for existing. He visited her every Sunday. She criticized him every time. He smiled through it. Died a little more inside. You know what he said to me? I don't even know who I am when she's around. That's not love. That's a trauma bond. So I'm asking you now, who do you become around your mother? How old do you feel in her presence? Do you shrink? Do you silence yourself? Do you perform? And deeper still, how much of your adult life is built on compensating for her absence? Her criticism? Her impossible standards? Carl Jung believed that true individuation, true becoming, begins when we confront the internalized parent. Not to blame, but to see, to understand. Because until you do, you will keep searching for a mother in every woman you meet. You'll keep waiting for someone to give you the love you didn't receive. But healing isn't about receiving. It's about revealing, seeing the wound, naming it, owning it, and yes, grieving it. So here's the hardest truth of all. You cannot fully heal until you look at your mother and finally see the whole picture. Not the fantasy, not the mask you wear to protect her, but the real woman, flawed, hurting, human. And when you do, something changes. You stop seeking what she couldn't give. You start giving it to yourself. And maybe for the first time ever, you start to feel free. Not perfect, not invincible, but real. And that's where healing begins. You think you're fine. You laugh. You work. You post pictures online with a smile so convincing even you believe it. But let me ask you something. Why can't you say no without guilt? Why do you replay that awkward moment from 3 days ago over and over like a broken cassette? Why do compliments make you uncomfortable, but criticism pierces straight to the bone? Have you ever wondered why you're always the one fixing things? Why you carry other people's pain like it's your job? Why your body feels tense even in moments of supposed peace? You're not dramatic. You're not weak. You're wounded, but your wounds are invisible, buried. So deep you've built a life around avoiding them. Let me tell you something about trauma. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in patterns, in overthinking, in people-pleasing, in the inability to rest, in the fear of being truly seen. Carl Jung said, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." You've replaced healing with coping, and no one sees it, because your life looks fine, but fine is not the same as free. Your trauma didn't end when the yelling stopped. It didn't disappear when you moved out. No, it evolved. It became part of your personality. You call yourself a perfectionist, but that perfectionism is a survival strategy, forged in a home where mistakes meant disapproval. You call yourself independent, but that independence is hypervigilance, a reaction to caregivers who were emotionally absent, unavailable, or unpredictable. You call yourself an empath, but maybe you learned to read every mood in the room because your safety depended on it. These traits aren't flaws, but they are signs, clues, to a younger you who never got to just be. And what about your anger? Where does it go? You bury it, don't you? Because anger makes you feel ashamed. It makes you feel like them. But here's the truth. You're allowed to be angry. At your parents. At your past. At the way your needs were ignored or shamed. You can honor your pain without becoming a prisoner to it. Suppression is not strength. Dissociation is not healing. I once met a woman who couldn't say the word need. She'd whisper it, or replace it, because growing up, she learned that having needs made her a burden. So she became the giver, the caretaker, the therapist to everyone but herself. She burned out, crumbled under the weight of her silence. And in therapy, the first thing she said was, "I don't know what I want. I only know what others want from me." That's what these wounds do. They erase you. And one day you look in the mirror and there's a stranger staring back. Polite, productive, smiling, but empty. Let's go deeper. Have you ever apologized when you weren't wrong, laughed when you wanted to cry, avoided asking for help because "I don't want to be a burden," felt shame for simply existing? These are not personality quirks. They're protective responses. Your nervous system adapted to emotional landmines. So you became small, silent, invisible. That's not your fault. It was your body's way of surviving. But survival is not living. Carl Jung believed that every wound contains a gift. Not because pain is noble, but because pain, when brought into awareness, transforms. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That means accepting the wounds, the anger, the neediness, the resentment, all of it. And it also means recognizing how those wounds shaped your choices, your relationships, your identity. Let me ask you again, why do you tolerate emotional crumbs in relationships? Why do you stay in jobs that drain your soul? Why do you sabotage good things when they finally come? Because deep down a voice says, you don't deserve more. That voice isn't yours. It was installed by someone who didn't see your worth. Or worse, made you earn it. You learned to perform for love, to earn your place, to shrink so others could feel big. And now you can't stop. But here's the shift. You can't heal what you don't name. You can't fix what you pretend isn't broken. So name it. Say, I am tired of carrying everyone. I am angry at what I had to survive. I am worthy of peace. Speak it. Scream it if you have to. Let your body tremble. Let the tears come. That's not weakness. That's release. Your healing won't come from reading books or listening to podcasts alone. It begins when you stop running from the mirror. I know this is hard. This isn't glamorous healing. This is the raw, gritty, lonely kind. But it's real. And on the other side of this darkness is something rare. Clarity, freedom, self-respect. Not because the past disappears, but because you stop letting it define you. You stop being a collection of your wounds, and you start becoming you. The real you. Not the version that was molded by survival, but the one beneath it. Whole, worthy, enough. You've never been broken, just buried. It's time to dig. One truth at a time, one tear at a time, one brave word at a time. And maybe for the first time in your life, you'll finally feel seen by the only person who ever needed to see you. You. We often think in extremes, especially when it comes to our parents. We either worship them or resent them, place them on a pedestal or cast them into shadow. We say, she did everything for me, or she ruined my life. One feels noble, the other rebellious. But the truth is rarely that black and white, and healing, real healing, lives in the gray. So let's talk about the most complicated figure in most people's lives. Your mother. Not as a saint, not as a monster, but as a person. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." And nowhere is that more visible than in the life of a woman who became a mother before she ever became herself. To understand your own pain, you have to be willing to see your pain. Not to excuse it, but to contextualize it. She didn't start with you. She started somewhere else, in a house, in a culture, in a lineage of stories and silences. Maybe she was told to be quiet. Maybe she was never allowed to cry. Maybe she was praised only when she achieved, performed, obeyed. And so, she passed that blueprint down, unconsciously. You weren't raised by her alone. You were raised by her wounds, her fears, her regrets, her unmet dreams. And in trying to give you everything, she may have accidentally given you the very thing she never healed from. She wasn't bad. She wasn't perfect. She was human. And humans, especially the unhealed ones, hurt people. Even the ones they love. Especially the ones they love. This is the tragedy of unconscious parenting. We pass on pain with the best intentions. You don't need to demonize your mother to heal. But you do need to take her off the altar of perfection. Because as long as she remains untouchable in your mind, your pain remains unnameable in your body. Let's take a breath here, because this is delicate territory. Many people flinch at this part of the healing journey. They think questioning their mother's impact is betrayal, that acknowledging harm is ingratitude. But it's not. It's maturity. It's awareness. It's the first step toward emotional adulthood. You're not here to blame. You're here to see clearly. Because you can't become who you really are if you're still trying to be who she needed you to be. Let me tell you a story. A woman, let's call her Sarah, grew up with a mother who was always anxious. Every mistake was a crisis. Every emotion was too much. Sarah learned to smile when she was sad and to say, "I'm fine," when she was breaking. Her mother never yelled, but she worried, constantly. That worry became control. That control became shame. As an adult, Sarah is hyper-independent. She never asks for help. She's calm under pressure, highly competent, and completely disconnected from her own needs. In relationships, she's often told she feels distant. She doesn't understand why. Until one day in therapy she says, "If I need someone, they'll panic. They'll leave. It's safer to be alone." And just like that, she sees it. Not to blame her mother, but to understand her wiring. This is the power of seeing your mother as a human being. When you do, you stop carrying her on your back, or fighting her in your head. You start integrating. You realize that she was a woman shaped by forces she never chose, by systems she never questioned, by traumas she never voiced. She tried. Maybe her best wasn't enough, but it was what she had, and now it's your job to do what she couldn't. Not because you're better, but because you're aware. Carl Jung spoke often about the mother complex. He believed that until we separate from the internalized mother, the psychological imprint she left, we remain in a kind of emotional childhood. This doesn't mean cutting ties. It means cutting illusions. It means seeing where her voice still speaks through yours, where her fears still shape your decisions, where her unmet needs still animate your relationships. You might find that your perfectionism is her voice. Your self-doubt is her worry. Your guilt is her emotional blueprint. And if you're not careful, you will pass it on. The path to healing your relationship with your mother is not paved with apologies or phone calls or confrontations. It begins within. It begins with the courage to ask, who is my mother really? Not the version I longed for, not the version I feared, but the woman beneath the roles. Who was she before me? What shaped her? What broke her? What made her afraid? And most importantly, what part of her still lives in me? You see, you don't need her to change. You need to understand who she is, so you can finally decide who you want to be. Not out of rebellion, not out of duty, but out of freedom. Because until then, you are not choosing. You are repeating. A man I once worked with told me this. I used to hate my mother. Now I just feel sad. I see how trapped she was, and I see how I've been living in the same prison, but with different walls. That is the turning point. When grief replaces resentment. When understanding softens blame. When compassion doesn't excuse the past, but liberates the future. Your mother is not your savior. She is not your villain. She is the first story you were told about love. Now it's time to rewrite that story with truth, with boundaries, with softness, and with the wisdom to know. She is not the end of your story. She is the beginning. How the rest unfolds, that's up to you. Healing isn't only about what happened on the outside. It's about what continues to happen inside. You may no longer live with your mother. You may no longer even speak to her, but she lives in you, in your thoughts, your voice, your choices, your fears. This is not metaphor. This is psychology. Carl Jung called it the inner mother, the internalized imprint of the mother figure we grew up with. It shapes how we see ourselves, how we respond to others, how we regulate emotions, and how we love. Even when we don't realize it, the mother inside us is speaking. She's there when you doubt yourself, when you tell yourself you're too much, or not enough, when you feel guilty for resting, for saying no, for having needs. She's the voice that whispers, "Don't make a scene." The feeling that says, "Keep the peace." The tension that rises when someone is disappointed in you. This isn't about blame. It's about inheritance. You didn't choose her patterns, but they were handed to you, and unless you examine them, you will obey them. Think about the way you talk to yourself when you make a mistake. Is it kind, patient, forgiving, or harsh, cold, punitive? That tone, that inner dialogue, is not original. It's a repetition of the way you were spoken to, of the way emotions were managed in your childhood. If your mother modeled shame, you will shame yourself. If she modeled self-sacrifice, you will abandon your own needs. If she modeled control, you will fear surrender. That's the invisible legacy, and it becomes louder the longer it goes unchallenged. But here's the hard part. The mother inside you doesn't only carry her voice. She carries your longing. The longing for comfort, for validation, for protection, for unconditional love. And when that longing goes unmet, year after year, it becomes a wound. A soft, persistent ache you carry into adulthood, into friendships, into romance, into work. You seek her, in other people, in achievements, in approval, but nothing satisfies it, because what you're craving is not external. It's internal. You're not only missing your mother, you're missing the mothering of yourself. This is where healing begins, not by changing the past, but by changing your relationship with the mother within. By asking, what did I need to hear as a child? What was I afraid to say? What part of me did I have to abandon to be accepted? And then giving yourself those things. Now, because you're not that child anymore, but the child still lives in you, waiting, not for your mother, but for you. One of the greatest misunderstandings about inner work is that it's about becoming someone new. But the truth is, it's about returning to who you were before you had to perform, before you had to please, before you had to protect yourself from love that came with conditions. The mother inside you may still cling to those old rules. Be quiet, be useful, be good, but now you get to respond. I'm allowed to be honest. I'm allowed to rest. I'm allowed to be seen. You rewrite the code, not overnight, bit vort by vort, choice by choice. Let me tell you a story. A man, David, grew up with a mother who was emotionally fragile. She needed him to be her strength, her therapist, her stability. As a child, he learned not to cry, not to ask, not to need. He became a caretaker, a fixer, a man who was reliable, responsible, and completely disconnected from his own vulnerability. In therapy, he struggled to talk about himself. He kept saying, "It's not that bad. I'm lucky. Other people have it worse." But under that surface, he was drowning in loneliness. Only when he realized he was still parenting his inner child the way his mother parented him, with silence and pressure, did things begin to shift. He started small. He allowed himself to say, "I'm tired." He learned to say, "That hurt me." He gave himself permission to not be okay. That's the reparenting process. It's not about becoming selfish. It's about becoming whole. You see, the inner mother is not fixed. She is plastic, changeable, willing to evolve, but only when you show her how. And yes, that can feel strange. It might feel disloyal or uncomfortable, especially if loyalty to your mother meant silencing yourself. But hear this, healing the inner mother is not betrayal. It's liberation, because the more compassion you offer to yourself, the less resentment you carry toward her. You stop waiting for her to apologize. You stop needing her to change. You begin to change yourself, and that is power. Carl Jung believed that integrating the archetype of the mother was a central part of individuation, the process of becoming your whole self. To do that, you must bring the unconscious to the surface. You must notice the patterns, name them, challenge them. You must turn inward with the same devotion you once turned outward. And that can be painful, because it means grieving what you didn't get. But grief is not the end. It's the door to empathy, to clarity, to freedom. So ask yourself, where do I still carry her fears? Where do I still obey her rules? Where have I replaced her voice with my own? And where have I not? And then day by day begin the shift. Speak to yourself as you would to a child who is learning to walk. Not with punishment, but with patience. Honor your effort. Soothe your pain. Protect your peace. Become the mother you always needed. And not just for your inner child, but for the adult you are today. That's the paradox. Healing the mother wound doesn't make you dependent. It makes you sovereign. Because once you nurture the mother within, you stop needing others to fill that role. You stop chasing approval. You stop contorting yourself to be loved. You start choosing. You start resting. You start thriving. And when you stumble, because you will, you don't collapse into shame. You offer yourself grace. That's the real gift. Not a perfect mother, but a conscious one. A voice within that says, you are safe. You are enough. You are loved, not because you earn it, but because you exist. And in that space, slowly, you come home to yourself. There's a moment in healing when you realize, this story doesn't have to continue. The pain, the silence, the fear, none of it has to define you. The things you inherited from your mother, the patterns, the expectations, the emotional blueprints, are not your destiny. They're your starting point. It's easy to believe that what was given to you is all you'll ever have. That because you grew up in a home where love meant sacrifice, where emotions were dangerous, where boundaries were violations, you're fated to live the same way. To love the same way. To parent the same way. But you are not a machine repeating code. You are a human being with choice. And healing begins the moment you claim that choice. Let's be clear, the past shaped you. It influenced how you see yourself, how you relate to others, how you handle conflict, trust, intimacy, and pain. That shaping is real. It lives in your nervous system. It lives in your habits. But it is not immutable. The brain can change. The body can heal. The heart can open. It takes work, yes. It takes intention. It takes courage. But it can be done. You don't have to keep living inside the emotional logic of your childhood. You can become someone new. Many people stay stuck because they confuse loyalty with repetition. If I live differently, it means I'm rejecting her. If I heal, does it mean she failed? No. Living differently does not mean dishonoring her. It means choosing what she was never shown. It means taking what was unconscious and making it conscious. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Repeating your mother's wounds is not fate. It's unexamined inheritance, and you can end it. But first, you have to see the pattern. Not in judgment, in awareness. Ask yourself, what emotions did I learn to avoid? What role did I play in my family to stay safe? What part of me had to go into hiding? What am I reenacting in my adult relationships? These aren't easy questions, but they are essential, because only when you see the pattern can you begin to disrupt it. Let me tell you a story. Elena was raised by a mother who lived in survival mode. Everything was a crisis. Money was tight. Emotions were dangerous. There was no space for softness, creativity, or dreams. So Elena became practical, hyper-responsible, always in control. She built a successful life, a career, a family, stability. But she felt numb, disconnected from joy, unmoved by beauty. In therapy, she said, if I slow down, I feel guilt, like I'm wasting time, like I'm betraying something. That something was her mother's survival script. She was living her mother's life, just with more options. And when she realized that, she cried. Not from sadness alone, but from the relief of possibility. She could rewrite the script. She didn't have to stay in character. The truth is, healing is a confrontation. With everything that once kept you safe. With every belief that once made sense. You will grieve. You will question. You will doubt. But in that process, you will also become. You will discover the person you were before the fear, before the shame, before the roles you were forced to play. That's not betrayal. That's rebirth. You may not have chosen the wound, but you get to choose what happens next. And if you want to stop repeating the past, you have to learn how to sit with discomfort, because that's what the nervous system interprets change as unfamiliar and therefore threatening. It will feel strange to say no. It will feel risky to rest. It will feel wrong to choose yourself. But over time, that wrongness becomes right. That tension becomes freedom. The body catches up. The mind adjusts. The heart opens. And new life begins. There's a moment in healing that no one talks about enough. It's the quiet, ordinary moment when you catch yourself doing something different. Pausing before reacting. Speaking your need. choosing rest instead of productivity, forgiving yourself instead of attacking. That moment is sacred. It's proof that you're not doomed to repeat, proof that the pattern is not stronger than your awareness, proof that you can choose something new, even if your mother never could. And this is where the cycle ends, not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent acts of self-respect. You don't have to fix your mother. You don't have to wait for her to understand. You only have to understand yourself, to meet yourself with honesty, to tend to the parts of you she could not hold. This is your responsibility now, not as a burden, but as an opportunity, to be the end of what hurt and the beginning of what heals. One woman, after years of repeating her mother's perfectionism, said this to me. I finally realized I don't want my daughter to inherit my anxiety. I don't want her to think love has to be earned. So I started telling her I love her just because she's her. And I started telling myself the same thing. That's how the cycle ends. Not by changing history, but by changing the present. By giving yourself what was withheld. By modeling what was missing. By remembering, you are not just your mother's child. You are your own person. And that person, you, has the right to live differently. So if you find yourself afraid to change, know that fear is normal. It means you're close to transformation. And if you find yourself feeling guilty, know that guilt is a signal, not of wrongdoing, but of rewiring. You're not breaking your family. You're breaking a cycle. You're becoming the one who chooses. And that is no small thing. That is freedom. That is responsibility. That is healing. You don't have to repeat this. You get to repair. You get to reclaim. You get to rise.